to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of her upcoming fight later on this month against Mexico's own Magali Rodriguez, unbeaten up-and-comer Caroline Dubois had this to say about Michaela Mayer. She had this to say about the former champion. She says, "I beat her at any weight."
She really wants that fight.
You've got to crawl before you walk, and for Michaela Mayer, Caroline Dubois has to amass some kind of marquee value. There has to be something in it for Michaela.
Michaela has been linked to a potential Natasha Jonas fight for what is Natasha Jonas's IBF title at 147 pounds.
She's not giving Caroline the time of day any more than Natasha Jonas is giving Lauren Price the time of day.
Not interested.
You've got to crawl before you walk. For the time being, Caroline Dubois will be sharing the ring with Mexico's own seasoned veteran Magali Rodriguez later on this month on the 30th. The 30th is going to be a very busy day in the sport of boxing. Boxers doing a show that day. Matchroom, they're doing a show that day.
Opataya versus Thompson.
And of course, the Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo fight that same day. It's going to be a very busy weekend.
That weekend, Caroline Dubois, who sports a professional record of 7 wins with no losses, no draws, 5 knockouts, she's going to be in action.
I think it speaks to the talent level and the ceiling of Caroline Dubois that they're putting her in there with someone as experienced as Magali Rodriguez, who has a grand total of 32 professional bouts, 32 professional contests, that they are confident enough in Caroline to put her in there with somebody like that.
Magali Rodriguez sports a professional record of 22 wins with 6 losses, 4 draws, 9 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times.
I think Caroline's going to knock her out. For what it's worth, I think Caroline at just 7-0 has everything she needs to stop Magali Rodriguez. Magali, who's coming off a majority draw against France's own Estelle Mosley, that unbeaten up-and-comer amateur standout and gold medalist.
She drew with Estelle in her last fight earlier this year in April.
So if you know anything about Estelle Mosley, you'll know that she made a better amateur than she's made a pro.
She doesn't have Caroline Dubois' spite, Caroline Dubois' firepower. Some fighters are better suited for the amateurs, and some other fighters are better suited for the pros.
Estelle Mosley, she's got several years in the game now, whereas Caroline debuted as a professional last year. She's fought 7 times since then.
The last fight was earlier this year in June against Argentina's own Yanina Lescano.
And the next fight is later on this month on the 30th against Magali Rodriguez, and I reiterate, I think she's going to dominate Magali. I think she's going to stop her.
She wants Michaela.
She wants Michaela Mayer. She wants to go after the big fish. After a little over a year as a professional, close to 2, she's got bigger fish to fry.
She won't get it.
I don't think she's going to have any more luck cornering Michaela Mayer than Lauren Price is having cornering Natasha Jonas. These established fighters and established names at these weights, they don't see a reason, an incentive to roll the dice with these amateur standouts.
What's in it for them?
When you think about fighters like Katie Taylor, fighters like Clarissa Shields, and the accelerated rate at which they navigated the pro ranks, the paid ranks, that it didn't take long for them to be fighting established fighters and established names, that's what Caroline Dubois and Lauren Price, that's what they want for themselves.
That's where boxers going to have a problem.
It's where they may end up at an impasse with these unbeaten up-and-comers. That most of the noteworthy names, most of the noteworthy fighters at or around these weights, anywhere in between 118 to 147, really, most of those fighters are on the matchroom side of things. You're talking about Terry Harper at 154, Sandy Ryan, Jessica McCaskill at 147,
Chantel at 140, and Katie at 135.
Alicia Baumgartner at 130, and the list goes on.
It's going to be a problem.
Seems to me that getting both Caroline Dubois and Lauren Price, the big fights, the big names, that could be a problem for Boxer because many of the big names, they're on the matchroom side of things.
You say that, well, Michaela's not on the matchroom side of things, and Natasha's not on the matchroom side of things, but I told you. They don't want to give these unbeaten up-and-comers the time of day.
What do you do? Well, if you're Lauren Price and you're campaigning at welterweight, but you can't get a big welterweight fight, what you can do is perhaps go up to 154, where Natasha held 3 of the 4 major titles at that weight.
She's vacated them.
Perhaps Lauren can move up and see if she can't pick up one of those newly vacated titles. If you're Caroline,
it's a little different.
Caroline campaigns in the lightweight division. Lightweight, that's 135 pounds. That's where Katie Taylor still holds all the belts. And while she probably can't get Katie Taylor in the ring, Katie doesn't have that much left.
That much longer. If she loses to Chantel Cameron later on this year in the rematch, it's hard to imagine that she sticks around.
Perhaps she retires and vacates all the titles, thereby hitting the reset button on the women's lightweight division, making those titles available for other fighters to fight for. A fighter like Caroline Dubois.
Katie retires within the next 12 months. Caroline Dubois has that to look forward to. For now, she's got to crawl before she walks. She's got to take care of the Magali Rodriguez's of the world.
Amass that professional experience and build her brand, build up her marquee value to give the bigger names an incentive to fight her.
Right now, there ain't one.
In men's super lightweight news, word around the campfire seems to be that O'Hara Davies, the mandatory challenger to Rolly Romero's WBA title, he may end up fighting Ishmael Barroso for what is the newly vacated title, provided that Rolly does not recuperate from his quote-unquote injuries in time. I'm honestly surprised that the WBA have been so Johnny on the spot with this. Johnny on the spot with a PBC fighter when we all know that they often provide them a lot of amnesty.
Consideration.
Think about how long they allowed Leo Santa Cruz to hang on to the WBA title at featherweight, Leo having not fought there in some time.
The situation we saw between Leo Santa Cruz and Lee Wood and how long that lasted.
Gervonta Davis up there at lightweight. He's had the WBA regular title since 2019. That's roughly 3 or 4 years. And at no point between 2019 and now was Gervonta ordered to face that division's full champion, the real champion, whether you're talking about Vasyl Lomachenko, a Teofimo Lopez, a George Camboso, Stephen Haney.
It's a clear pattern.
That the WBA don't normally put the squeeze on PBC fighters for whatever reason, but when it comes to Rolly, they decided to. They decided to hold his feet to the fire shortly after he became champion, ordering him to fight O'Hara Davies, at which point he was reportedly injured.
Maybe it's due to the controversial nature of his victory over Ishmael that the fight was stopped. It was a premature stoppage based on punches that didn't land.
That him becoming champion was farcical to begin with, and that there's nothing in it for them. There's nothing in it for them in allowing Rolly to hang on to that belt. Who knows what their rationale is? All we know is that they're holding his feet to the fire, and it didn't take them long to do it. Now, Davies versus Barroso could happen if Rolly is still injured, and that fight is being targeted for the Garcia versus Duarte undercard in November.
Ryan Garcia.
It's not a coincidence, the placement of that fight on that particular show, that they want O'Hara Davies to show what he can do on the same show as Ryan, because it's their intention to match them against each other. It's their intention to make Davies versus Garcia for the WBA title, which is what I always thought.
That's the end game.
All O'Hara's got to do is beat Ishmael, and all Ryan's got to do is make it through his next fight, get back in the winner's bracket, then they can settle up with each other.
That's it. Where does that leave Rolly?
Who fucking cares?
Elsewhere in the men's super lightweight division yesterday, Jose Ramirez versus Arnold Barboza purse bid was canceled for what was an ordered IBF eliminator. I'm not at all surprised to hear this because they're both managed by the same guy. They're both managed by Rick Mirrigan. And while Arnold Barboza might want to get Jose in the ring, or someone like him, a former champion and a noteworthy fighter, Jose.
I don't know how he feels about that fight. I mean, why would he want to fight Arnold Barboza?
A fight that stood little chance of making its way to the ring is no longer available to the highest bidder. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that a purse bid hearing previously scheduled for Tuesday was canceled for the ordered Jose Ramirez versus Arnold Barboza IBF Junior Welterweight title eliminator. IBF representatives were only able to confirm that the hearing will no longer take place or is due to be rescheduled for a future purse bid. Top-ranked representatives did not offer any clarification on the matter. Rick Mirrigan, who manages both Ramirez and Barboza, did not immediately respond to an inquiry seeking comment or confirmation on plans.
There's no incentive for Jose to fight Arnold. There's an incentive for Arnold to fight Jose, but not the other way around.
The development marked the second time that a sanctioning body has failed to advance a Ramirez versus Barboza fight. The bout was briefly in play by way of the WBO when it was believed that the two-division lineal champion Teofimo Lopez would stick to his retirement claim after his June 10th title win over Scotland's Josh Taylor. The order was rescinded when it was confirmed that Lopez opted to hold on to his WBO title, though he has yet to schedule his next title defense.
That's because I think he's going to fight Ramirez. That's because I think he's going to fight Jose Ramirez later on this year on Heisman night.
And yeah, that's just me bouncing ideas around. That's just me brainstorming. But the reason I think Jose is not fighting Arnold, the reason I think two separate sanctioning bodies have ordered this fight but it hasn't materialized, is because Jose and Top Rank have plans of doing a Lopez fight.
That's what I think.
For an unbeaten up-and-comer like Arnold Barboza, of course you want to get in the ring with a former champion like Jose Ramirez, and of course you want to fight in a title eliminator. If you're Arnold, that makes sense, but if you're Jose, it might not.
Makes no sense.
Why fight a hungry, unbeaten up-and-comer in an IBF title eliminator, a final eliminator, to become whose mandatory challenger? Subriel Matias? I'm sorry to say that Subriel, he ain't worth no money, and he's not on Jose's side of the street anyway. He's over there at the PBC. Jose's still with Top Rank.
I'm not against the fight, you understand. I'm just wrapping my mind around what could be Jose's rationale. Why fight Arnold for a title he's not after anyway?
It's basic arithmetic. I think the Jose Ramirez it is. You make more money boxing Teofimo Lopez for his WBO title than you would make boxing Subriel Matias for his IBF. And you don't have to cross the street to fight Teofimo, but you might have to fight Subriel. So why go through with it?
Why go through with an eliminator to fight him when you're not after him?
Now you may be asking yourself, where does that leave Arnold Barboza? Because he's got the same manager as Jose Ramirez. Rick Merrigan, he manages him too. But what makes you think Rick wants to see two of his guys fight each other?
Fairly confident he'd prefer that they fight other people.
Perhaps what makes this a conflict of interest, I think, is that Arnold would be willing to fight Jose, but I'm not convinced that Rick wants that for him. I'm not convinced that Rick wants to make that fight.
Even if it shortchanges Arnold.
Maybe Arnold should go to Matchroom. They've got a good number of 140-pounders that he can fight. Or Golden Boy.
Way I see it, Teofimo Lopez has never wanted to give Arnold the time of day. I'm not convinced that Jose does either.
I'm convinced. Before we see Barboza versus Ramirez, we'd end up seeing Lopez versus Ramirez on Heisman night later on this year. And finally, you may have heard earlier today that it's official. Conor Benn is back. Conor Benn is back, and he's going to be boxing this weekend on the undercard of Hitchens versus Zepeda.
So much confusion in association with Conor Benn's situation.
Well over a year now on this thing. For me and my money, it's gone on long enough. Boxing scribe Dan Rafael stated the rumors are true. Matchroom Boxing has announced Conor Benn has been licensed by the Florida Commission and will return this Saturday in Orlando on the undercard of Hitchens versus Zepeda. He faces Rodolfo Orozco at 154 despite not having yet been cleared after multiple positive drug tests.
And that's not accurate.
Twitter user that goes by the name More Than a Casual stated, he's been cleared by the WBC and he's been cleared by UCAD pending an appeal. What more do you want him to do?
This is the confusion I'm talking about.
Dan Raphael responded by saying, the WBC does not abide by strict liability, so being quote-unquote cleared is not relevant. Look it up if you don't know what that is. Further, sanctioning bodies are not regulators. They handle rankings and belts. He has not been cleared by UCAD. Fact.
Here's what the facts are. The National Anti-Doping Panel cleared Conor Benn some weeks ago. UCAD does not agree with that adjudication.
And that's why they are going through the appeal process. However, they would have nothing to appeal if Conor weren't already cleared.
Comprendo, friendo.
They wouldn't have to go through an appeal process if he weren't already cleared by the NADP.
He's free to fight.
And if you needed any further indication that he is cleared and he is free to fight, he's fighting this Saturday.
In Florida.
No, UCAD does not agree with the NADP's ruling, but that doesn't mean that Conor's not free to fight. That doesn't mean that Conor's not cleared to fight. He is.
He's fighting this weekend.
And what the boxing media's fixation with Conor Benn is can be chalked up to a fixation with Eddie Hearn and Eddie Hearn fighters because they don't have this kind of energy for other fighters that are with other outfits that have tested positive for banned substances, the same as Conor.
Dan Rafael added, going to have eggs for breakfast in his honor.
To which Conor added, you wouldn't be able to see the eggs because they'd be covered in 100 layers of cheese. It's this type of lazy journalism that got you replaced by Mike Coppinger. Comment that harkens back to Dan Raphael's years as ESPN's boxing guy. Eventually, he was canned, he was sacked. Listen, when you make references to eggs...
Yeah, that's cute.
Conor Benn publicly stated that whole bit about the eggs, that didn't even come from him. That came from the World Boxing Council. That was their assessment. not his.
We're gonna be adults about
As
this.
far as what Conor Benn said, what he actually said in reference to this banned substance fiasco, he said that he feels his test samples were mishandled.
What he's been saying.
Perhaps his test samples were mishandled. In any event, Conor Benn's not the one saying it came from the eggs. So if you're taking jabs at him based on that,
What is lazy journalism, isn't it?
he's going to be facing Rodolfo Orozco this weekend, who sports a professional record of 32 wins with 3 losses, 3 draws, 24 knockouts, having never been knocked out.
In 38 professional bouts.
Guy with a lot of pro experience and a lot of rounds in the bank, albeit against pedestrian-level opponents, pedestrian-level competition. And this is being billed as a junior middleweight contest. Questions as to whether or not Conor will return to welterweight, since Eddie Hearn is still targeting a Chris Eubank Jr. fight for him.
It's been over a year since Conor Benn's last fight. He was last in action in April of last year opposite the ring Chris Van Heerden.
Those things in mind, though I myself haven't actually seen Rodolfo Orozco in action, I hardly think they'd put Conor in there with a world beater under these circumstances. The way he's got obvious ring rust, he needs to shake off, he hasn't fought in a while.
You know.
That Conor Benn is not taking jabs from boxing scribes like Dan Rafael lying down, and that boxing scribes are still taking jabs at him.
Why?
They're doing so under the guise of wanting a cleaner sport, still taking jabs at him over his banned substance fiasco. But I didn't see anybody losing sleep when Oscar Valdez was just in there with Emmanuel Navarrete. Nobody's stuck on Oscar's banned substance fiasco,
It's ancient history.
or Tyson Fury's banned substance fiasco,
It's ancient history.
or the fact that even though Jean Pascal tested positive for something like 3 or 4 banned substances, Lou DiBella was still willing to work with him. They don't keep the energy for Lou that they keep for Eddie.
When Lou DiBella's female champion Hannah Gabriels tested positive for a banned substance, that did not elicit the same reaction as when Alicia Baumgartner tested positive for a banned substance.
Thus, the truth reveals itself. These people don't care about doping in the sport of boxing, because if they did, the energy would be the same across the board. And their real fixation with this entire Conor Benn case is that it's a matchroom fighter, is that it involves Eddie Hearn.
They weren't as interested in the Hannah Gabriels situation as they were in the Alicia Baumgartner situation.
They lost interest in Oscar Valdez's banned substance fiasco a long time ago, but here they are, holding to this situation, holding to Conor Benn.
You want that he should never box again?
It's been over a year. You don't keep this kind of energy for other fighters in this same situation.
Hypocrites.
I'm glad he's back. It's time to move on.
This has been drug out long enough.